Welcome to another episode of the Silk Stocking Sisters. We have now the second episode with my interview with Dr. Craig Yorke. So speaking of that, you mentioned a couple of people that you and your family encountered by growing up in Boston. And I'm thinking specifically about Malcolm Little. Can you tell me about some of the people you came across growing up in that era?
Well, let me be clear. I never met the guy. Uh, the vignette in the book comes from 3 years before I was born, and I only learned about it when I was in college, I think. Uh, but my aunt was she was ready to deliver, and we're all living in Roxbury. Her family, my family. I wasn't born yet, but there were no ambulances coming to Roxbury at that time. The war had just ended and gasoline was rationed and so forth. Uh, but my aunt, knew someone down the street who knew this red-haired young, gangster. And I'm really unclear what the lever was that got him to befriend my aunt and drive her to the Boston Lying-in Hospital. But that's part of family lore, and
Yeah.
and it's accurate. I know it's accurate.
Yeah, that's what happened. There's stories like that for many people. Like I have stories growing up in Harlem, in New York City. People, like I said, would be amazed because that's where they could live.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
couldn't live other places.
And
So,
and for your listeners, Malcolm Little, was arrested less than a month, I think, after he helped my aunt out, and he was put in jail,
yeah,
Charles Street Jail in Boston, and the rest is history.
exactly.
Copied out the dictionary and changed his last name to X, and
Right. Interesting point. But see, this is interesting. We don't come across people now like that. We don't. It's like how he helped out your aunt because people have. What's your sense about? I know we're transitioning. What's your sense now in terms of? Do you think that there will be a Dr. Craig Yorke now, like what you experienced? Do you think that would exist now in today's society?
that's a really good question. Um, Despite the experience I had at the Latin school, it's in my will. It is definitely in my will because it is a durable resistance to rampant inequality,
Okay.
accelerating inequality.
Okay.
When I go back there, hopefully I'm going back for my 60th reunion this spring. When I look at the students, I see people who will become somebody like me. Now, when I was there, it was a lot of Jews, Irish, Italian. Now it's Cambodians and Haitians and Guatemalans and, you know, Chinese and Vietnamese. So I think that the fantasy, the dream of a multiracial democracy lives in that building. I don't know where else it lives, but it lives there, and
Okay.
it's worth supporting.
Good point. Excellent point. So that's a tidbit out there for people understanding about the Boston Latin School. Um, so now let's transition, we're going to transition to moving from that experience in Boston area, it's attending the Boston Latin School, going to Harvard, and deciding, what medical specialty you're going to decide.
Yeah.
What made you decide to specialize in neurosurgery? That's the first thing. And then the second part is this. Do you think your early childhood experiences impacted your decision?
I don't think that my early childhood experiences impacted the decision. It began with the war on poverty and Lyndon Johnson's Great Society
How
because
so?
I needed money to get to Harvard, and I got a job working in a laboratory at Mass General Hospital, big hospital in Boston. and I came into contact with psychologists, psychiatrists, neurophysiologists, and I fell in love with the nervous system, basically. So I started by cleaning rat cages. That was my first job. But I kind of I wanted to do something other than medicine, I think. But the war in Vietnam played a role, aimed me to the natural sciences. I
Okay,
didn't
tell the audience why the Vietnam War in Vietnam, because some people don't even know about that. They
Yeah.
don't even talk about it. What
If
what
you
what was it?
if you were a guy in
Okay,
college in the mid to late '60s and you majored in English, you might find yourself in Southeast Asia. If you majored in chemistry or physics or went to medical school, you stayed in the US.
good point.
That's basically it.
Alright.
So I
See,
was fascinated.
people didn't know that. See, so many
Yeah,
people don't know that.
yeah, yeah. I was fascinated by the nervous system. I wanted to be a psychiatrist, honestly, because they really dressed well and they thought about they thought about the conditions of the human mind. I'm a teenager,
I
understand
know,
this one.
but it's a good laugh. I love it.
They drove cool cars, and these guys in Boston would go down to the Cape for the weekend. I thought, this is what I wanna do, you know?
Right.
But then I ran into this guy who was a neurosurgical resident. We were across from each other at a la in a laboratory,
Okay.
and, he kinda took me under his wing. His dad was a coal miner in Pennsylvania,
Oh,
and, he said, "You know, these psychiatrists are all talk, you know, and we surgeons are not the trained monkeys that you've been told." So, he takes me on rounds, and one day, Saturday morning, he said, "We're going to the OR. We're gonna explore this guy's head." And
okay.
the man looks like he's on death's door. I mean, he's in coma, can't move one arm and leg. We go flying to the operating room, and, Jim Waxick drills 3 holes about the size of a nickel in the skull, very strategic places. And when he opens the membrane over the brain, I remember it to this day, what looked like motor oil just rocketed out of the head, it's like 6 inches into the air.
Okay.
And, I couldn't believe it. I'm trying not to throw up. I'm trying not to faint. But we get to the recovery room,
Okay.
and the guy wakes up and he says, "I've got a headache, but, where's lunch?" And I said, "You know, these guys have the right stuff. These guys can raise the dead. And I'm I'm a young man, and I don't know what these people actually do." But at that moment I thought, "Hey, I'm gonna be a top gun.
Yeah, that's
I'm
what you
gonna
say
do
after that
this." Yeah.
right?
Yeah, crazy.
So that was an interesting way to be able to segue into the specialty, huh?
And it's crazy. It is crazy, Teresa, because you make these decisions not know with virtually no information. But I'm not alone in that. I know
No.
that a lot of people do the same thing.
Exactly. But it's good to hear authentically from someone who actually ex we have a society where you only wanna hear mushy, mushy, "Oh, this is how I did it because I did such and such." But to talk have someone speak about a unique, clear path of, "Okay, well, I wasn't really sure, and this is what happened." And who would have thought about that experience? People need to hear this
Yeah,
because we're in a society now, and they feel everything's set in stone. You got to do this, you do it this way, and this is how it happens. And there's no way to go around there. And this is the only way you do it.
yeah.
All right.
The power to be surprised, very important.
Very important. So I'm fascinated. I was just fascinated with your light story because it almost resonated really well with me because it reminded me a little bit of what I did, as a black woman in America, right?
Mm,
And not really, not understanding um, why I was driven to do what I did and what I'm still doing. And I'm thinking to myself, this sounds like he could be my brother.
it is a
You
shared
know,
experience. It's a
yes.
shared
So
experience.
Okay, so I thought about I said, "This is fast." I said, "People need to read this book." So, okay, folks, you're gonna have to buy this book. We're gonna make sure you have the information at the end, again, to mention where the book is available. But that I still see from what you explained, I still believe it was your parents' foundation that provided you the impetus to be open and welcoming, to see things not just like they're set in stone, that probably led you to be open to the opportunity when you witnessed that experience about being in that lab and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
Don't you think there was something to do with that because of their exposure or what you felt that they wanted you to do? Don't you think some of that had something to do with you getting to that point?
That's true. My parents were among the angriest and most talented people I've ever known. I mean, my dad taught himself to be an engineer, electrical engineer. My mom read Emerson, you know.
Yeah.
They very much wanted to be included in the American project. And, I write in the book about hierarchies within the Black community.
Yes.
They were not welcome
Yes.
uh, in those hierarchies, but it didn't stop them from from trying
Right.
to lead a full life.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And that's why I'm really impressed because then they have a son who does miraculous things. Okay. Okay. So their sacrifice, because it was a sacrifice.
It was a sacrifice across generations. I mean, they could have stayed in the community, and my mom models for NAACP fashion shows. My dad was an Omega Sci-Fi, although
Q Dog.
yeah, but, he never finished college, so he never felt like he was fully part of that group and was kind of made to feel that he was at the margin.
Right.
And that was an engine for him too.
To pursue what he pursued.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. But that shows you that tenacity that comes
yeah.
with
It's
being that kind of a person.
it's a steep climb, just an
There you go.
aside. By the
That's a
way,
steep. That's a steep. Then that's a steep.
yeah,
I love it.
yeah.
I love it.
By the way, the book is available on Amazon, and the website is really complicated. It's craigyork.com. York with an E.
Craigyyorke, folks. Okay, so make sure you
Dot
spell
com.
that correctly. All right.
Amen. Amen.
So now we're gonna get the last part of this. Now, this is the transition: living and practicing medicine in Midwest. How has it been as opposed to the Northeast United States for a Black family? How can you explain to me and the audience what's that been like? I mean, I'm a Northeasterner. Okay,
Mhm.
all my education's been Northeast.
Mm.
I still live in New York City. So, born and reared here and still came back, lived in Cincinnati, Ohio, came back
Mm.
to New York, and went to school upstate Rochester, New York. So I'm just saying, what was that like? Because that's not something typically that happens, especially coming from the Harvard background. Most Harvard people stayed near Harvard.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. I don't know how much to say and how much to leave out, but the move to Topeka, uh, the origin story begins in my chief resident year at UC San Francisco.
Okay.
I was on an academic trajectory. I
Okay.
was looking at assistant professor jobs at UCLA, Pittsburgh, Emory. Part of being the chief resident at UCSF was accepting referrals from the surrounding area in the Bay
Okay.
Area. And what I learned quickly was that there were more neurosurgeons in the Bay Area than there were in the United Kingdom.
Wow.
And these people were nice, they were good guys, but
Okay.
they were doing a lot of surgery that didn't need to be done, to be blunt about it. And the jobs I was looking at were also in overdoctored areas, areas that had more neurosurgeons than the population would justify. At that moment, I got a letter from this guy in Topeka, and he said, "Come look at the practice." And I just got married, and I said to my new wife, "Hey, what about we look at a job in Topeka? At the moment, we're sitting in a rickety apartment that has a beautiful view of the Bay Bridge and downtown San Francisco.
Right.
And there was a long silence. And she said, "Let me think about that." The next day, she came back and said, "Listen, I've been looking at it. Do you realize that the Klan is active about 30 miles east of Topeka?" I said, you know, anyway, so we decided to go look.
Mhm, mhm.
And the guy said he had done some heavy lifting. The
Okay.
equipment was better than what we had at UC, the nursing staff, the ICU, and he was covering 450,000 people by
Wow.
himself. He
Wow.
was on call every night and every weekend for 3 hospitals in Topeka. The closest neurosurgeons were an hour and a half away. He said, "You know, Craig, you can take those jobs at, those academic centers, but if you go there, you're gonna be an assistant professor, you're gonna face yet another hierarchy, and you're gonna be superfluous. If you come to Topeka, you're gonna be necessary,
Yeah.
and you're not gonna do kinda hand-me-down surgery. You're gonna do high degree of difficulty, high benefit surgery from day one.
Good point.
And you're gonna live in a community. You're gonna live where people know who you are. You're gonna live on a street where you'll know your neighbors and where the friction of life will be low." So Mary and I gave it 6 months.
Okay.
And, once our first son was born, it became clear that life was gonna roll easier for us. Uh, any of your listeners that lives in a big city, think about the friction of getting to the post office.
Tell me.
Think about the friction of finding a place to put your vehicle.
Yeah. Parking.
Think about the friction of getting your kid to preschool or elementary school. All of that went away.
Okay.
And that, and also being necessary, um, meant that there was less overt bigotry. You
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
the moment I arrived, I was a major benefit to the hospitals in the town.
Okay.
You know, without a neurosurgeon, you can't do trauma, you can't do a lot of elective spine surgery, and so your revenue is down. So I was integral to the community from day one.
Okay.
And we came to have good relationships and friends. And I'll just run my mouth a little bit more.
Okay.
The biggest surprise so far from having published this book was the launch, the physical launch at the Topeka Public Library,
Oh,
which
that's where it was
is,
launched? Okay.
yeah, which is really a good library. The
Mhm.
town, by the way, is the capital city of
Yes.
Kansas,
Okay.
130,000 people.
Okay.
I knew Linda Brown from Brown v.
Did you
Board.
really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh my gosh,
And
amazing.
I keep forgetting her name, but the local secretary of the NAACP who introduced Oliver, her dad, to Thurgood Marshall, she was a feature of the community.
Uh,
Anyway, we get to the library to launch the book, and they've reserved a room that holds about 150.
right.
Well, 350 people show up.
Wow.
I mean,
Wow.
um, the librarian is on the phone to the fire marshal, it's just crazy. And the the lesson was that I was embedded in the community.
Mhm.
The lesson was that I had spent many, many hours in family waiting rooms, in examining rooms, in soccer practices, in parent teacher conferences, church services. I mean, people just came out of the woodwork, you know, and that was a shock because, you go about your life and you don't realize that you're increasingly a part of a community.
Yes, and it's
Anyway,
obvious to them that they want to show their appreciation to
yeah,
you.
I mean, "Hey, doc, you don't remember me, but you saved my life in 1997," you know? So that was the experience of
Okay.
coming to Topeka.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. Well, I'm not going to keep you too much longer,
Yeah,
Dr.
yeah.
York. But let me just say to the audience, the book is available in hardcover, paperback, and as an ebook. Am I correct?
That is right.
Okay.
It's available on Amazon and in brick and mortar stores across the country.
Okay. Look for it's called Steep, a Black Neurosurgeon's Journey with Dr. Craig York. So thank you so much, Dr. York, for your presence and just sharing this story. Thank you for listening to another episode of So Stocking Sisters, the second episode of Dr. Craig York. Hope you enjoyed. Have a great day, everybody. Bye now.